Vitaly friends, I am Vitaly Portnikov. Practically all the manula is good and west today. The pit was a sign of Donald Trump's so-called polar plan to eliminate Russian-Ukrainian guilt. And even yesterday I surrendered more documents just propanuit by an official of the American administration, and not in May. It is clear that it is up to the president with the documents received in the state. I was talking yesterday about the fact that the target plan can be turned off by checking the readiness of Ukrainian positions. The White House allowed to print a new tour of the process with the Russian Federation. Today, the plan looks like a Bilschmensch official document. But for the crom of how to the President of Ukraine Vladimir Zelensky and the Minister of the Army with the staff received, and stayed until the Ukrainian capital. And the weather is all simple from the President with the accounts of the agricultural plan received in the state by Donald Trump. Overgrown media publish all 28 points of the plan. I respect the preparations of Steve Witkow and the Secretary of State in the state of Marco Rubio. And I'm guessing turns met with a special sign of Putin Kirill Dmitriev. You and I, as you know, can see these points. E2 moments were enough for analysis. Moment number 1. Steve Witkow and Marco Rubio himself says the Yak plan is about the frame of ideas, Yak is about positions. Yaks can be negotiated by the parties, and there can be absolutely and the consequences of those points from the places of the plan. Then these are just such framework propositions. And then they absolutely did not understand the words presented to the Moroccan administration about the fact that there would be a serious plan. I have already had dinners with Kiev and Moscow. And my yak on Shvid, as if in the fact that yak can be Shvidku praises and decisions according to the plan I'm on the imposed side. And I can still make adjustments to Donald Trump's campaign from Vladimir Zelensky, so the European leader. The offensive moment is a full view of hundreds of real comments in Russia. Donald Trump himself met with the President of Ukraine Vladimir Zelensky during the election campaign, says that it takes two to tango. In fact, in order to ensure that there will be a plan for the opposite, both Ukraine and Russia were numb in his mind. And for another 1,000 to Ukraine. It is necessary that Russia with a point and that plan. I will be with the received states from Ukraine. It's overgrown at the Pentagon to say that for the COB itself, it's like a soap dish mish with the received states and Ukraine. And there are topics that are not absolutely unintelligible. I am you still with the receipt of the state and Russia, Trump and Putin reach the tame by the water. Then we could have with you the points of the tame by the water imposed on Ukraine. Impose on the President Ukraine will lie the American military and American sanctions against Russia, and in the American financial. Not richly less for President Biden, because I want you again to look at the fallow look of America is not critical. The reset of the separation of the European reset, the American failure is called 4 European pennies. And Trump is not the one to arrive. I would do so, and double the Munich years between the Prime Minister of Great Britain, Chamberlain, the Prime Minister of France, the Reich Chancellor, not Hitler, and the Prime Minister of Italy, and Mussolini. I actually tore the edge of sovereignty, and was added among myself, and brought my point of view to Prague. After all, she did not ask for a Czechoslovak Prime Minister in France, and in Britain, with two European dictators. And right there in the scene in the pack. Here I am also Prime Minister Chamberlain. You add with the President of Czechoslovakia Benis to walk the deed. Even before the trial, what we look like, and for those to bring their not spile decisions to Chancellor Hitler. It is extremely not ostensibly to the youth of Mich Berlin and London that I will take out. The President of Russia is for the miracle of Trump's peace plan, and for the Russian generals to persuade all plans with Russia. Proviv for an oyster with the Chief of the General Staff of the dropped forces of the Russian Federation, and the head of the Russian aggression against Ukraine, General of the Army Gerasimov. Now I'm Gerasimov, having seen the Russian Ochilnik, I'm going to skip the Kapinka. And Putin was talking about the fact that Ukraine is maliciously corrupt. And we also have a plan for a decent diet with the President of Ukraine as a grinder of corrupt, malicious extinction. According to Putin, the President of the Russian Federation. And the President of the Russian Federation is not with the burnt water of anatomy that we have in truth. Mova can go about the fact that I will continue this special operation of mine so-called, and everyone will be reached. Without naming the person you are, of course, your own. Moreover, Tilke literally sprat in volume, for sprat to the cob of our today's Ratsmova, in those companies. With what Russia Teshkan and you are on the act. She will also be on the Smutesh and on actions. And Russia itself is absolutely not ready to support the fact that such actions work. And the most valuable moment does not give up, it is necessary to pass for a conversation. There is also an American Sky Plan and consultations with the President of Ukraine. His readiness also speaks about all plans with the President with the staff received, and not the greedy real, official ones in open consultations with the Russian Federation. He was also shod by the Minister of the Army with the staff received. In May, oysters with the President of Ukraine arrived in Russia. Oysters with the President of Russia. And in the Kremlin, Chitko said even in the scenario of the President of Russia, not like firm an oyster, firm the President. Firm the Minister of the Army with the state received, the son of the President with the state received is not May. And absolutely the same moment has been squeezed out. We're overgrown. And torture. And what are you dropping out in the hall? For what? I understand the logic of the process. Supposedly it was sprat days in the days of armor. And I woke up, I would say, at 1 o'clock. Literally a kirk before the Yak implemented serious American sanctions against Russia. Pershi such sanctions of the Trump era. Sanctions against Russian naphtha companies Lukoil and Rosneft. The outcry about yaks for self-natural entrepreneurship in the whole world began to be purchased by Russian naphtha. Even before those sanctions were implemented by President Trump. Kirill Dmitriev was sent to Washington, not to make an oyster of President Putin with President Trump. To the fact that Putin needed Zustrich herself in order to have an American colleague. For the rights of new sanctions against the Russian Federation and in an active temple in Ukraine. That Dmitriev's task was I'm just for Skoda its sanctions. And it was his head one of the turns. In principle, the deep sea fits into the logic of President Trump propanuit, but UMR plan would not be that. I am starting to discuss with President Zelensky and the European Ukrainians. I'm not the president yet. The prices are rotten, it's his lack of constructiveness. And the sauce kind of classes for the rights of sanctions against the Russian Federation. I'm still the president and have a negotiated plan. Prices filthy drive bit classes of sanctions against the Russian Federation before driving the cob of the SOAP process and Shvidkov, ending Russian-Ukrainian guilt. Moreover, the Russian Federation itself may not take into account the fate and Tilko with a posteragate of the idea of an imperious outfit. Zateki again managed to take Trump out of the game. At the need of Trump's side. Trump may have his beatings. We are talking about the fact that sanctions can also be imposed on the Russian economy. She is not aware of the inertia of the Russian economy for another hour, allegedly allowing Russia to fight against Ukraine and our energy, and to bury it on the territory. She and Nish. Pour everything Shvidko. Secretly, you are already closing the short list of candidates for the Nobel Prize to the mayor. And Donald Trump will not be able to get propa in the fire on the Russian-Ukrainian front, flying like plywood over Oslo. I am honored by an extremely ambitious and glorious American Ochilnik, but he did not have enough. In general, everything was like this. And on his sanctions in 3 or 4 rocks and in 2 hands will produce such an act on Putin's side. Not the style for scandals to look like Webstein's files and win the election. With the 3rd impeachment in my political career, I still Democrats will control 2 chambers of parliament. And just ask for his blockaded cabinet and a certain Nobel Prize. Trump is not in his political prospects either. I want the Nobel Prize, I would like to open it and already the offensive rock is guaranteed. And Trump may have one more thought in the whole situation. I am still for seeing off these sanctions, and Putin does not like his weakness and the fact that the Nobel Prize. But the reputation and date have been floated on, which is obviously not necessary for the American president, and absolutely not for those who are ready to attack the days tied up firm Russian-Ukrainian guilt. So PPR can try and analyze those 28 points with you. To the fact that, in principle, it is still possible for discounts, and realistic. And for discounts, and can be accepted for Ukraine and Russia. That's it. Points of sovereignty of Ukraine. Another point is that there will be a full agreement between Russia and Ukraine and the European Union about not attacking. The ambiguity of the other 30 Rocky will be counselors in the regulated. It also means no one, of course. What does ambiguity mean? And I will be tied up and by Russia, often on the territory of Ukraine. It turns out that Russia will not invade to neighboring Ukraine, and NATO will not expand, yes. I can, of course, the situation of NATO will expand further, and of course, I can be legally secured by Kim Chin. For the fact that Russia will not invade to the neighboring edges. A dialogue was held between Russia and NATO for mediation, with the staff received to resolve all the torture of non-mines for de-escalation, and to provide global, non-economical intelligence for interaction. What this means, no one knows. It's a word. The fifth point is Ukraine on the Yaki guarantee. It is written on the Yaki specifically that such a guarantee of the purpose of the non-dropped forces of Ukraine will be up to 600,000 axis. Ostensibly, of course, such an army is hardly already effectively protesting aggression. Ukraine has enshrined in its constitution that it is not equal to NATO. NATO, it seems, has adopted into its statute provisions that the primates of Ukraine, and the moment the Ministry of Zakordny certificates of the Russian Federation, extorted the kind obtained in the state outside of NATO from the Grudny 2020 attacks in Ukraine. Allegedly sweeps, it was clearly said that NATO simply cannot praise in its statute of the article Im Zubov halls, are not primates of Ukraine. And the president with Joe Biden received in the state for propane to Putin about the real pro-European Putin kind of everything by attacking Ukraine. NATO does not stir the temple in Ukraine. The European ones will be located in Poland. I will have us guarantees. USA firm compensation for guarantees. Trump made sense at the expense. I'm still Ukraine will invade before Russia, it's in the middle of a guarantee. Again, there is no written Yaki guarantee. I'm still Russia will invade before Ukraine. Strong coordinated temple views. Not all global sanctions will be visible, but knowing the new territory, it will be all years. But Russia would live in the territory because of the sanctions. I still want to launch a rocket at Moscow for no reason, and St. Petersburg guarantees and will be counselors. And I'm still Russia for no reason to fire missiles at Yaroslavl-Chituli. Guarantees will apply. Yak licked. Why in an idiotic document, Moscow and St. Petersburg are respected places there, you can shoot, but shoot all over Russia. I want to. Ukraine in May has the right to membership of the European Union, and the separation of a short string preferential for access to the European market is still being examined. Not I Kim Chinov with him on Ukraine members of the European Union. The leaders will be afraid of the very access of Ukraine to European Rome. The ambitious global package of seizing gas in Ukraine still includes, and not the entire fund of the wiring of Ukraine, for investing in gas with a high level of increase, including technologies, data processing centers. This is piece-by-piece intelligence. With the receipt of the states will be opposed from Ukraine, and for the split, the wiring of modernization is visible. This operation of the gas infrastructure of Ukraine also includes pipelines. It's well clear that Trump wants our GTS. Not like Russian gas, of course. And for our year, no one is talking about minerals the most, but this is so. The sawn-offs are visible on the territory. I have suffered their fault for apparently not reconstructing and modernizing places and residential areas there. Infrastructure wiring, a brood of self-serving diggers on the natural resources of Ugoda. The Light Bank is responsible for developing a special package of finance for the regret. And Russia. Russia will be reintegrated into the light economy. I will discuss the lifting of sanctions in stages. This is in an individual order. From getting a staff from hunger to a bargain about economically knocked down, the holy mutual rose. In the fields of energy and natural resources, and the infrastructure of the peace internet. In the center, in the stump of data, in the project with you rare metals, and so mutually beneficial to Dmitry Namayut Spock. And now you do not pass, what kind of happy points? Russia will be requested, turned around because of the group. Well, I'm leading to the adoration of Trump, so that Russia is again in the T group. Trump responded to all Putin's requests for the presidency, the adoration of the American president produced before the summit. Trump grew up in the States about the idea. Frozen cats will be painted with an offensive rank. $100 billion of frozen Russian cats will be invested in an infusion with the received states from it. Can be seen in Ukraine. What we call that Russia is ready to see, and $100 billion is visible on Ukraine. With the receipt of the state requires 50 acres in arrival. What cute reasons. Europe, yes, up to $100 billion of investments are still available for Ukraine. And frozen. In Europe, Russian cats will be thawed, that frozen Russian cats will be invested in an American-Russian investment instrument, and a split American-Russian project will be implemented. It will be seen from the direct to the reference motivation from the split. Then it's actually Trump who wants to pick up and are often on Russian as you are, of course. The shutters on the SON American-Russian Working Group are tested to ensure that the channel is laid. Russia legislators fixed the policy of not attacking Europe, then Ukraine, but in Russian in Zagoli in the Constitution. In Russian laws and politics, I will attack Europe, then Ukraine. You are still visiting our territory today with a specially military apparatus, and Putin has allowed for a request. On the territory of Ukraine, to detach the Shlyak voting in the upper house of the Russian Parliament of the Federation. On the Russian Constitution. I'm going to chin. I still want to fix the starved policy on attacking Europe, then Ukraine, and yak Putin. Tell me by not getting a staff, this is Russia being added, will continue the idea of contracts. It's not a nuclear dump everywhere, it's control over it, including the START Treaty. Ukraine without a nuclear power before the nuclear dump treaty, we are already without a nuclear power. It's not obvious. For the nuclear power plant will be launched by the IAEA. And the cut-down electricity will be distributed equally between Russia and Ukraine. About the life of Ukraine, having fun in PROA programs in schools, now it's nice to understand that tolerance to different cultures. And he has racism and food about two Slavic peoples does not test it. Yes, these are massacres. Whom Trump scrolls, he respects walkie-talkie. I want to talk about it. Ukraine Prima rules of the European Union, Feder religious tolerance Tazik. We are already in May, and all these rules in our legislation, including the charter in the National Tilka Maya machines, seem to be correctly applied in the behavior of the editorial board. Not that those are the most powerful powers, but that we have butts at a time. Well, and you, of course, the Ukrainian order kind of fangs from the Verkhovna Rada of the imperious proposition. Even before the correct charter for the fact that it is possible for him to know such a turn. There are still such propositions of Trump. About the life of Ukraine, matchmakers are added to all discriminatory visits, as well as the rights of Ukrainian and Russian media retinues. That's actually what propanuit us again in the desert, then on its territory Russian propaganda. The whole Nazi ideology is a defense activity. And here I am, like an infection and easier, and in fact, we were attacked by the Nazi power, calling us a Nazi. It doesn't say whose. And I'm still talking about Russian positions. Territories. Crimea, Lugansk and Donetsk will be called de facto by the Russian and including with the received states. What is de facto he understood. Kherson and beyond Paris will be frozen on the line still means de facto knowledge on the line. Despite the fact that in fact on the was, that my Ukraine is completely sold under the control of the Russian Federation. All the Donetsk and the entire Luhansk region, of course. And Kherson and for this there will be a frozen conflict. I can see you from the moment they drive. Russia is adding prominent territories. I'm on territory control. That Russia will also cover the entire territory of Ukraine. Climbed on our Russians are fighting for what the Ukrainian forces are withdrawing the clock in the Donetsk region. Yakov and overgrown controls. And the whole zone turns into a neutral demilitarized buffer zone, internationally called. I to the territory still to lay the Russian Federation. And the Russian forces will not enter this entire demilitarized zone. Uzagoli is very reasonable. Ukrainian forces are being withdrawn from the orbit, but Russian forces are not being introduced there. The demilitarized zone has been demilitarized, and the Russian territory will not be led yet. Territorial as the Russian Federation, so Ukraine is tied to treason by these forceful methods. Guarantees are not for damage. Russia is not in Astana, Ukraine, and the Dnieper River for commercial activities, and will be reached until Youth Pravilno on Grain Black Sea. More. A humanitarian committee for you to solve in open torture. Humanitarian torture. All overestimations in the Tolapun will be exchanged for the principle of everyone for everyone. All civil servants are and will be turned, including children. A re-eating program will be implemented. There will be live visits to increase the suffering of the victims of the conflict. Humanitarian torture, I won't do them. Ukraine holds elections in 100 days, I am of course on fire. All parties have been caught before the conflict from a full amnesty of guilt, then there is no need to make claims. That is, you extort from Ukraine more investigations of military malefactors in Russia on the territory of Ukraine and throw in. That's still all these ill-willed will be, no one will agree to this, and I will be controlled by the Rada and the mayor and Trump. There will be sanctions for the collapse. Again, at the gathering before Trump in the Rada, there is no function and cannot test such an elementary moment. Like the scatter of Hamas. Trump wants to. And then there was another Zazumila Rada. If after all the parties wait with this memorandum, the Prips are on fire on the walls of Guy. On that supposedly two sides will come out and join up with the points for the Cobb. Well, we know his whole situation came out absolutely. Absolutely specific points, in fact, are not Trump's, but Putin's. Nazi ideology, denazification, the speed of the Ukrainian army, demilitarization. The withdrawal of Russian-Ukrainian troops from the territory of Donbass and Russia can conquer for rocky places. CFS. Absolutely, absolutely, this situation is beyond reason. So I'm not going to say absolutely the plan there yet. You know that everyone is being sent to People's Deputy of Ukraine Alexei Goncharenko. In public. In principle, in public. It's close to the plan I boof about publicly and Western doctors. In principle, what we did on Goncharenko's Telegram channel, I did with various Western media to collect the points of the plan. There was such a wonderful item. I'm still Russia, Maya pays and pennies for rent are often on the territory of Donbass. At a time there are Ukrainian troops, and in May, Russian control will be established in a demilitarized one. Well, in principle, the soul is a wonderful story. And we will also perceive this idea as a crank, and there will be all sorts of things, from Zelensky and Trump to the greatest days. And Trump, and the sauce for the rights of sanctions against Russia. Then we will be able to say more about our work in disputes. And how can the plan be implemented? But I'm not talking to you yet. Also, the plan looks realistic. But the skin is about rumors to overgrow 28 points. Having beaten the yak, you can really look. Here. I would like to say even now. The tag of our broadcast continued from the oyster of the President of Ukraine Vladimir from the faction of the servants of the people. And from the oyster chick that it may have personnel decisions for the Crimea. Tied by the head of the office of the President Andrei Ermakov. And richly I would not rent from my family. Can I publicly not publicly here are the discounts I dilute on the air. And I, in principle, mark my position, who respected Andrei Ermak's appearance, not for the sake of ostensibly. Andrei Ermak will also forget the furnishings. Breathe in the president's office. Overgrown. Yak scenario lives on oysters. I tried to put the test of Andrei Ermak's spacer for the harsh reaction of the Ukrainian president. So it is clear that Ermak is saving his landing and swimming in the office extremely. And this means a full-scale, politically rat. This is something that is extremely curtailed to a member of the servant of the people faction by the bookmark of finishing. And about the fact that what acts as his agent of Russia, and is aware of the discounts richly deputies from the servant of the people faction, logically, and in fact. Tomorrow I will already be clear, and the position of the whole T faction will not be available for resources. And in the parliament today his speech is so important. Supposedly, of course. So you honestly are like this, I would say, have you tried everything for us? Even in the city, we have such plans. There and the overgrowth declare to pour her corruption, and the political edge to increase with the skin. I want to tell you more richly, who I respect still, the whole story with Trump's plan. It is just tied up with a corruption scandal. I will decide up to this version. I'll tell you more. In the plan, tied up with the Pershing leaf fall, and still, I would at once be corruption scandal in Ukraine. I made a speech about something I would like to tell you. I respect the overgrown president of Ukraine for not being richly intelligent and not up to a corruption scandal. In short, of course, I do not accept unpopular decisions to praise, and I am the owner of Holland. And we can be pumped up often Navi for the sake of giving praise to popular solutions to the right ones. And for me to come to Ukraine at such a serious, viscose moment, let's say. And the inner spark lives, worries at a time for sure. I will not be the deceased, and my political situation. And it looks like that's actually about the Moscow, yourself who is about him, that is for Moscow. So I am a respectful corruption rat, she created a serious position on the richly bilsh. even before serving Ukrainian interests below and in, and this is absolutely normal speech for me. What good can we say? Here. Well, again, it's so practical all for the dawn of media. Publish all these points of the Plan Murno, and richly drowns in the chair. Even richly the points can be replaced with the received states from Ukraine and Europe. And a wonderful speech. Now the idea for Ukraine and Europe, and not from Russia, will continue again. Well, tell him a wonderful situation, which is tied up with the fact that you and I will be from America. And the Europeans being and Trump. And the Russians will say that they are in Zagoli. They don't know anything, dimensional plans don't want to know. Tesh is an absolutely correct speech, supposedly, of course, in the situation. Well, these are, I would say, sketches. The future is more than a little, I think, but you are on the input plan there yet. Are you Trump for this situation? I want to tell you and ask you that you subscribe to the channel, those who are not subscribed. Subscribe to the fact that we are with you and the demon channel is millions 23,000 to us like it's over. And I'll be to you too in the Diachnik. And that you are eating up to 23,000 new subscription channels. Weasel put your padobeki, that this ether is a weasel so I will be in your Diachno. Still will comment, still you think the process is successful, plans can still be called, and. But it is known that I will be in the Diachnia to you behind the channel, as a slave tool. Here. Torturing the ether. That we can be Chica, and at the time of the Trump plan. I'm absolutely not sure. I am just a respectful president of Ukraine who has taken an absolutely correct position from the point of view of the president. With the information received in the state, I think that in an hour of oysters and with Trump, it is already known that Trump is in a better way to say such cognitive situations. With him it is not necessary to connect this propane. To the point that the Osvedem is covered with a swim on Putin and on with him. It's so easy to demonstrate both Imperia's constructiveness and then demonstrate to Trump not Putin's constructiveness. Although Trump wants Putin to show constructiveness. So, I adore still Trump is put before Putin. Trump is literally not Putin constructively, and not so at the moment. And I'll tell you about Tilka, again. Putin is really at peace with sanctions. Whose is this lawsuit, whose imposition of capitulative houses, the result of political and visceral instability in Ukraine? The order is set to such an order. And the adoration of Donald Trump will complete the Russian-Ukrainian guilt to the fierce 2026 rock for the Nobel Prize. Nothing. Do not require this global construction, there are no Maya there. And supposedly on the light order. So, in that regard, there are few points tied to stabilization in Europe. And I'm torturing you again. Russia would also have enough stabilization. Navi she started the Russian-Ukrainian war. Why Zara Trump, extorting in Russia, could still be a nobleman without any fault. I'm already going to punish about what I'm guessing, discounts in the 2013 kind, there were Russian scales in Ukraine. Monuments to Pushkin, allegedly in Russian swims. And TPPR Russia, yes, these are to drag through and all this stuff, the image of convolutions, and without knowing how much you can drag through. And how much people need everything. Why does it happen to us that the reason is still Tilky the Russian statements about the Propa did not mean in the fire? Informatively laughing. It's just that we're clinging hopefully. So many Ukrainians continue to live in the light of Nicola Biel. And it is important with the Ukrainians, continuing we can still stop, and we ignore the Russian Federation. And the authorities adore Till. But I'm going to tell you the famous Mayor's Forum in Switzerland. Discounts reports. Discounts Ukrainian diplomacy Virachala. I'm still in the goal of the forum is simple. Their Tesh was a polar plan. Sweeps and discounts were so much in the president's plan. And now the holy press has been probing, and allegedly still does not want Russia yet. But here you got in, it was fair there, the Sprats knocked down Ukraine's retinue from the powers. All there and the president hugged. And also from Russia. And Ukrainians respected the mayor's forum, as they are tied from the mayor. You are absolutely right. A single real step crock to the end of the war, the food of youth between Ukraine and the Russian Federation, laying two-sided shlyak. And since it was laid grain please about the prip in the fire on the Russian-Ukrainian front. Here is my adoration of the President of the Russian Federation. Without the adoration of the President of the Russian Federation, the wines in the 30th hands of zero prospects are completed. Tom is like that again. And what are we still bragging about to the Russians in our minds, then absolutely was. And that is, we are not balked tomorrow, there will be such reactions from Moscow, and they will say that they are preparing to negotiate there. That they are preparing to get used to it. A political twist. Russians can say that they are ready to meet and sprat Rocky. Of course, what is the criminal problem of the plan? Trump of the president with the received in the state. To the clearing, to what needs to be put into the fire. And the Poe negotiates, and the plan is overgrown in the plan again. The point that it is necessary to sign a memorandum with the Cobb, and the pot is taken into the fire. And you are in the hall, of course, a discount for an hour, can end memoranda with such a puncture. Cannot stink it in two directions. And having discussed the Europeans. You still respect Trump for taking the Nobel Prize to the mayor. Yashina expresses the potential of falling into a reputational failure case with Epstein. The Nobel laureates have immunity. The Nobel aviation is extremely not supposedly immune. And for Trump, the Nobel Prize may be on its own. And they will respect the obvious fuck, not as a reputational failure. Nigh from the Nobel Prize to the moment about sharp on the attack, in reputationally failing in the case with Epstein. As a counselor, because there I am not a fact in the subject of legislation. And Trump can counsel that he will win the Nobel Prize before the election. The whole Nobel Prize is my statue often before the election. According to the Republicans before the choice. And it's just that the Democrats will succeed, there's no shame in opposing the Congress. I won't ask him anything, and he will already have the Nobel Prize. The situation has been fucked up for years. The years of writing, then signing, are all for the bulls of the coming day. We are on a rhetorical torture, and Putin gave the go-ahead. But it doesn't sound like. I will say again, Putin moment extorted Kirill Dmitriev. Kirill Dmitriev also writes to the booths of the inhabitants of Vit, and to Ruby, in order not to impose sanctions. I'll tell you honestly, it's a head story. Everything will be clear from tomorrow. To rest against the US sanctions against Russia, and to rest. I'm still going to rest against it. Trump has a real tool in his hands, Yakim Lyakady Putin, and tells them also, let's not let you hear. The fact that you will chat and sprats in the income is visible. Unbeknownst to Putin's discounts for Putin, Vahav Chik. I will think that the Commission on the Infrastructure of Circumvention of Sanctions will still be able to get behind the keel. We don't know you. And Trump for the clay for the send-off. But Putin has an incentive. What do you think? Why is Russia in the offensive? Lesson on pasta on the European Union? Having forgotten the so-called attack, there was hope in the oil perspective in the economy and in the readiness of NATO. I respect you not yet, and Russia's attack on the European Union will not. On insurance that Russia has drones, and the Europeans clearly can't have a drone on cotton wool. Just because it's the fault with the nuclear bloc. And I hope I won't stop some. I'm not turning off the offensive lesson yet, there may be a scaling conflict. Look at the hybrid guilt and sabotage actions of Russia on the territory of European Ukrainians. After all, the arrival of anonymous attack drones may be on the territory of the European Union of Ukraine NATO. And that means guilt. I hope that you think about the uprising. Russia is already absolutely in a toad. I will throw in a hammer to cook for a rocky sprat. We don't know, and I'm Putin is put to get his economy in his power. I am. Ermak. Deputies are hearing out from the faction, but I'm not batting such behavior yet, because I'm leading the ether cant. And with a mat and a nozzle for Ukraine. We have a cold European Union, even against the background. I think that everything was normal to what is real history. Goncharenko is still bursting with all the rumors planted, and by ear, and you decided that the opponents were given in the president's team. That's so that I don't give infections, like there are real political heirs today. Reactions, look out. Here. So it is absolutely real that such a speech should be said about. Just the torture is, I'll look and be a political rat for sprats. And on discounts overgrown in Parliament, everything will be fine functional. And I respect the not yet respectful and not bright problems with the protégés of the Ukrainian Parliament. This is the demand of the Ukrainian army. On a real growl. You don't have my expression. What kind of Ukraine I am recruiting a patient just requires a dogliad to the rest. Still on the truth, there are no powers there. I don't think so. I think that for the sake of the future, I was going to fall asleep to save the Ukrainian state, for a simple reason. That otherwise Russia would look at the rich before his power cordon. There may be massacres, looking like a power from the point of view, and revenge in the unions. That is, they can still lead a single normal guarantee of Europe. It's like Ukraine's membership in NATO and in the European Union at once. Who will be able to advise Ukraine in NATO on production before the conflict with the Russian Federation? Even my Ukraine will just be frequent on the European spin. And that is, I will tell you to the Prime Minister of Gorshina Viktor Orban. Maybe my Ukraine is still like a buffer power between Ukraine and Russia. And none of the Europeans, of course, no one. After all, she is Orban, absolutely numb in the fact that there were Russian troops in Uzhgorod. But not Maya. I don't think anyone in Ukraine is like a dying patient. I think it is absolutely real that the Europeans will fight for Ukraine to preserve the torture of territorial integrity. There is also the torture of territorial integrity. Of course, this is absolutely torture you are currently torturing at the end of the discount. Ukraine will be a member of the European Union and NATO. But in principle, according to a realistic type of Tanya, it will be possible to tilke the completion of the Russian-Ukrainian guilt. It turned out not to overlook everything we are going to talk about. From the speech Overgrown, it is said in The Guardian. A clear thought about the fact that the whole plan and provocation, and that yak are scattered and disoriented. Allies in Ukraine. Well, Stesh is absolutely logical speech. Heckadia is overgrown, and for the skin who is who for those situations. Here it would also be necessary to earn money in order to hang on. I need to continue with Donald Trump. The girlfriend needed the status to declare secret plans for provocation. The speed is European in status. With Donald Trump on Tilke, European leaders. I mean, it's unlikely that they can be completely satisfied. And we will lead to Bachila again. Friedrich Merz came to the German in the Say plan and did not yak at Donald Trump. And hundreds with the reaction as well as the real reaction I am, of course. I think that you need the same and do not pass. Trump needs to be diluted, needs to be diluted. I don't respect that we need to get out of Trump his team. Girlfriend, you still need to get those sanctions. I'm still flooded. In general, of course, we still have Trump in his head, no one is of any use to him. And our main argument was that Russia responded to Tilke's actions with the influx of sanctions. And yet, these are sanctions even before she acts, she is fasting. My hope for tomorrow on the 20th is that for these sanctions against Rosneft. Because I'm generally going to tell food on the real road to Zekanchina guilt. Economically laid out Rus. Ukraine needs to have filed the heirs of a corrupt rat and political ones for those who need political forces, and, of course, President Vladimir Putin is called important. I do not stop by the fact that she is in the lava of the ruling party. To notify on this approach, I am not giving yet what is in the president's office and what he will have in Ukraine. The less understanding there is between the Ukrainian media of the Ukrainian Vlad, and the less political consolidation there will be between the Ukrainian and the sovereign. I absolutely believe that this coalition has been handed over in the Ukrainian Parliament of the powers, and they will, I would say, have a protected view of not having power at the bottom and a view of corruption flows. The speech is already important, of course. Well, after all, what happens outside Paris is overgrown, and such a cable, fires broke out together, and wounds were not in us before the impact of Russian air bombs. At the very moment, Vizim Shakadov from the Black Sea are going to Odessa and the Mykolaiv region. There is a new launch of Shahid in blackouts in Ukraine, as you know today. And at that moment, we were thinking about Russian peacefulness, about not locking up lessons in tolerance in Ukrainian schools, to cruel and criminal aggressors with missiles in dirty residential quarters. And the vice president with the staff received J. Devens. I'm still ready to take the steam train to Trump's food. I'm already talking about what Ukrainians demand for the fact that Russians and cultural mats. And Nagata and the vice president with the staff received. And to those who are his fellow thinkers in the lavas of ultra-right political activists with the information received in the States. That Ukraine did not attack anyone and did not persecute anyone. That Russia attacked the pose of the bloc in Ukraine. At that time, the only canonical church was the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the Russian Patriarchate before the departure of the most venerable Patriarch Kirill. Another option is canonical for the church itself, because the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the Kiev Patriarchate was not bound by holy orthodoxy in the seasoned Russian Vyskov, in the Crimea and in the Donbas. And it was in the 2013 kind. Still, everything is further away according to the idea of mention. I will swim into the Russian and Russian cultural simply. Of these, the Ukrainian ones are dedicated to the wild animals of Russian culture. And the monument of the Russian poet chauvinistic fields of Alexander Pushkin. And hundreds of Ukrainians tolerant to their subsidies among childbirth turned out to be right to bomb. It is tied to the fact that Ukrainians attacked someone there. And that we were attacked by criminal Ukraine. It is important for the Hromadians and Ukraine. And until the moment when the vice president with the staff received in Kiev is represented by the Kiev mainstream political Duma. Of course, it's not me on the fault of January Chipizno that the staff themselves will be pulled together. And the choice of Donald Trump is not a visionary one to believe in Nikola, not the lessons of history. We all need a chat. So the situation is developing shvidku, you can go tomorrow. Well, what can I say? We will check out this and of course still see each other at a distance, supposedly of course. Here. I'm telling you that you were on the live terrestrial broadcast. I thank you for your torture, I thank you for your podobeki comments. I too will ask those who are subscribed to the channel to subscribe to it. I will be to you in the diaknia to what I'm guessing, in fact, we are getting up to 1 million channel. And just 23,000 to 1 million of the entire channel have been heard. I'll be glad too, you'll still have 23,000 breaks. With the tools of the channel, but it helps the Ukrainian army to give a share in the verified collections of sending to and from my social and social people you trust. The Ukrainian army also sweeps in those on simple minds you overestimate. And the future belongs to a single important guarantor of Ukrainian freedom.